astrology consultant. I'm talking about how to avoid toxic relationships. I did a little video on TikTok about it, but I'm going to go slightly deeper into it because it's a threefold thing in terms of how to find and avoid toxic relationships. It's really key. And one of them isn't actually astrology. I will touch on that one first, actually. So basically, two people come together, and what we don't seem to understand is that we have a history of how we operate, how we used to operate, especially from the early stages of development when you're a child to when you're like 8, 9, 10. And through those early stages of when you're born to when you're about 8 years old, you have been developed in a certain manner by your parents or parent or your carer, whoever that may be. And that style of development is how you are going to operate mainly in a relationship. Not always, obviously. There are anomalies without any shadow of a doubt. But that's how you mainly operate in a relationship. What you've seen and what you've been receiving, the love you've been given, the attention you've been given, the nurture or lack of it, etc. Abuse it, etc. etc. So basically what I call this is trauma based. Trauma based. And when it's trauma based, sorry for my spelling and my handwriting, it's terrible, it's disgusting. I can't even read it half the time myself. Honestly, I look back at it and think how. But anyway, trauma based. Trauma based. Uh, Basically, you need to basically get with someone who has a similar level of trauma or lack of trauma, because when you don't, so when, for example, when someone has trauma which is basically quite abusive in their early childhood, and then someone who doesn't, even if they get together and they like each other in many different ways, what happens on a serious level, and I'm only talking, this is relationships that are serious. This is serious relationships, you know, how to avoid toxic relationships seriously, on a serious note, not, little flings and little, you know, encounters that people have, this is just serious stuff. So if it's trauma based and someone has less trauma and the other person has more, what happens is when these two people start to get a little bit more comfortable with each other, these traits start to come to the table. And what happens with these traits when they come to the table is the person doesn't feel comfortable in someone else's way of operating, because that someone else, if they operate how mum and dad operated or their carer operated, this person would feel very comfortable. But because this person doesn't operate like that, there's an uncomfortability factor. And then there's that, then what they're not used to and what they've not been brought up on, then they think, well, if this person is acting like this, and this person could be acting very kind, very nice, helping out, and this other person who's gone through trauma where they was neglected, for example, may feel like, why does this person care so much about me? My mum or dad never cared about me. Why does this person care about me? I don't trust this person. And then that person's going to try to test that person in many different ways. And this is where the conflicts arise, and this is where the lack of understanding arises, even though that person may still want to be with that other person who's being nice to them, because they know, mentally they know that's okay. That person is being okay, but they just psychologically cannot trust that type of operative. Understand? So the trauma based is essential. It's essential to know where you are and how long your relationship or how good your relationship will be. I always recommend that two people should have similar trauma experiences. Yeah. Similar. It doesn't have to be the same, because not everybody's going to have the same, but it should be definitely on the same scale. Like if they grew up with their mum and dad and that person grew up with mum and dad, and maybe that dad was maybe a little bit, rude or like challenging the child, but because they both grew up with their mum and dad, they will still kind of get it. They'll get it if their mum and dad also love them, which is key. which is the key element of it, how they are treated, it, regardless, how they're treated is the key element to the trauma base. It's essential. Second is my field, astrological compatibility. Astrological compatibility is the second. I would say trauma based is first for long term. This is number one because it will not last, and you'll be unhappy if, because even the person who's been abused or been given a lot of trauma, for example, even that person is more comfortable with a person who is also been traumatized at birth. Do you understand? They're more comfortable, even though they might argue, fight, and this and that and that and this. The comfortability level, because they're used to that type of behavior growing up, they are more comfortable. So therefore, it has more potential to last longer because both have the same expectations. Astrological compatibility is number two because, but there is also, I will add, there is also element where this astrology can trump trauma, and I will get into that. Astrology, there is rare element where astrology can trump the trauma. I'll get into that after I explain about astrology. So astrology compatibility. So let's say you have good trauma, you have the same level of trauma, good or bad, whatever. Then you can explore the astrological compatibility, because then you can see whether this person is right for me, likes what I like, I'm attracted, they understand me emotionally, they understand how I operate, you know, all these different compatibility levels that we find within astrology are key to making a successful relationship. So, for example, let's say you had someone who had this trauma, but it's the same. Two individuals had the same level of trauma, but their astrology compatibility was like at 30% compatible, for example, because I do calculate the percentages when I do readings. So let's say it's 30% compatible in someone's astrological compatibility, but their trauma base is great. Is level, should I say? Great. Is level. What happens is that they tend to stay together if they're serious, obviously, but they're never happy. There's no happiness. They stay together because maybe they've managed to have children together, or maybe because one is so traumatized in one way, and the other person understands their trauma because they're traumatized. They have this kind of bond, but the happiness isn't there, the connection isn't there, the understanding isn't there. They just feel this is kind of like, this is like service orientated type of relationship where they're just serving each other's needs and egos, and one person is always dominating another in this type of 30% trauma equal relationship, or lack of trauma, even the lack of trauma, even if it's lack of trauma and it's 30%, and if two people have a lack of trauma, it's still the same. There's still a lack of happiness. It doesn't matter. So that's why astrology compatibility is key to longevity. If I flip it the other way around and someone had a 90%, which is very high, very, very high, and then they had a trauma, one person had no trauma, or a small element of trauma, and the other person had quite a lot of trauma in their life, but their astrological compatibility is 90% or above, this is where we get the third element, which could trump both of these. What happens is, because this 90% compatibility is so rare in astrology, but it happens. There is no doubt about it, and there's many ways to calculate it. Because of this 90%, what happens is something happens in the connection between the two people, and it's it. One person is traumatized, the other is not. That one person who's traumatized has so much respect, so much admiration, because the way they communicate is so good, the way they understand each other is so good that the person who's not traumatized has so much love for the person's integrity, honesty, openness, because the connection is so strong that they can't help the openness and the communication, and it's constant and it's not fake. And the person who's traumatized isn't having to be, someone that they're not, isn't having to be this circus, this circus that has to perform X, Y, and Z just to maintain the relationship. But they know that after 1 year, then they're not going to be able to. The person who's traumatized can be their authentic self. The person who isn't traumatized appreciates that person for their authentic self, regardless of the trauma. And what happens is, because their connection is so strong and the communication is even stronger, it tends to fan out all the the arguments, and arguments still do arise, but the communication and understanding is so clear for each other that it's just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. Because it's 90% above. You have to understand, guys. You have to understand relationships. The word relation, yeah, ship. This is when you're with someone in a serious relationship, you're on a ship. You are on a ship, whether you like it or not, whether you believe it or not. You are on a ship because you are encountering a journey to the unknown with somebody stuck on a ship with them. You're stuck, and you have to deal with that person continuously on the boat, continuously, and you don't get off the boat until you end the ship, till you end the relation. Yeah. So you have to think about that. And what is the main key component to any being with someone most of the time is communication. Okay? It's communication. So 90% or above, astrological compatibility are going to override the first trauma based essentials. Yeah? It's going to override it. It cannot help it because the pull is too much. The pull will not let each other go. And sometimes that pull is so strong that both are willing to bend, even though both may feel like this person is X, Y, and Z, but the connection is so brilliant. And when these potential toxic traits come out, because they do, everybody has them, but someone who's been more traumatized will have more. And when these toxic traits come out, the person who, the people, when they have a 90% connection, the person who isn't toxic knows exactly how to deal with these toxic traits. But like I said, it's rare. And that's why it's rare. But because that person knows how to deal with their toxic traits, this person respects this person, the person who's not toxic, highly. This is the key. It is the key. And it takes time when it's 90% and not equal on a trauma base. It takes time, but they get there. They always get there. Always. This astrological, last thing I'm going to say is astrological compatibility, when it's not serious, is where you want to go. Where you want to go when it's not serious, where you want to go when it's someone that you like, someone that you fancy, someone that you are interested in, and you don't know if it's serious or not, you don't care, or maybe you do care, regardless if you do or don't. You're gonna find what you need in astrological compatibility. You're gonna find it. You're gonna find everything you need. You're not gonna find the trauma, but everything else you're gonna need. And you know, let's say, for example, like, you see that it's 30% or less. Let's say you see it's 30% or less. What's the point of even looking at the trauma base? Because you're gonna be unhappy anyway. What's the point if you're gonna be unhappy? Do you know what I mean? There's no point. Everyone just wants happiness in a relationship because you're on the ship, on the journey to discover new things. It's a new discovery, and you're discovering yourself as well. It's self-relationship at the same time as relations. You know what I'm saying? So it's all different things happening at once when it comes to relationship. That's why relationships are the hardest thing, because you are on a ship with someone else and you're going on the journey, and maybe babies might arrive, and then you're still on that ship with babies. And this world is a rocky ocean. I think everybody can agree with that. So you're on a relationship in the rocky ocean, potentially with babies, and you want to be with someone who has different trauma to you. So you're going to argue more. You're going to be more angry because you're going to be nice. That person is not going to understand it, or the person doesn't want you to be nice because they don't understand it. They're going to be pissed off that you're nice. it, it, it's really up and down. It's really up and down. But you can still have the drama. You can still have the intense, maybe not arguments, but conversations, intense, interactions. But they'll be solved and resolved because your connection is 90% and above. It's an amazing connection. I'm the astrology consultant. If you disagree or agree, let me know, because I like to know. Have a great day.